This is The Civil War by Kobe, Bree, and John. Starting with Fort Sumner in April 1861, the Confederates planned to take over Fort Sumner, and they were ordered by Robert Lee, the general, to open fire. This would mark the official beginning of the Civil War. The Confederates do manage to secure it and take over it, but there are no deaths from either side of this battle. The first Battle of Bull Run was in July 1861, and this battle's importance was that it was the first mark of the bloodiest and most violent war to ever happen in America. Overall, there were almost 5,000 deaths. The Battle of Shiloh was in April 1862, and at this time, Johnson from the Confederates was forced to retreat and was killed. This was the first Union victory, and they had around 24,000 deaths, and whoever could see this war and the outcome would have been cured of the war and wanted it to end earlier. In June 1862, for the 7 days battle, Robert Lee led his army to Virginia to protect it from the Union, and a total of 36,000 people died, and McClellan's army was forced to retreat, and the capture of Richmond was not successful, giving the Union a defeat. So the siege of Vicksburg, the Union used the Anaconda strategy they developed, and eventually the Confederates ran out of supplies. This was a Union victory, and this was the turning point in the war for the Union to look like the victors. The Battle of Antietam was in Maryland in 1862, and this is the bloodiest single-day battle in Civil War history and possibly in history overall. In 12 hours, there were 23,000 deaths, and the Union was victory. The Battle of Gettysburg was in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It was a 3-day battle. Robert Lee was leading the Confederates to try to take over. The Union did win the battle. There were around 15,000 deaths, and the Union's plan was to hold off the Confederates from the center of the town. Sherman's March, conducted by Major General William Sherman, used a scorched earth tactic, marched from the captured city of Atlanta to the port of Savannah. Operation Deep Behind Confederate Lines, while the Union has no supply lines, was to destroy the backbone of Confederacy, which led to the surrender of the Confederate States. So the importance of women was they organized the Lady Society to fight for the cause. They supplied Union troops with food, clothing, and cash. Some wanted more and became nurses, took jobs that previously only men worked. More than 400 women disguised themselves as men and fought in the war. The government agreed to establish the United States Sanitary Commission to provide a preventative and sanitary service for the benefits of the Army. The U.S. Sanitary Commission provided almost $15 million in supplies. Immigrants had a striking presence in the war. 200,000 Germans, 150,000 Irish, almost no distinctive immigrant group in the Confederacy. Irish immigrants were angered at the fact the Emancipation Proclamation favored African Americans. Over 179,000 African American men served in more than 160 units, 10% of the whole army. Free men rushed to participate and fight in the war. The Militia Act freed all slaves that had masters in the Confederate Army. The first black regiments designed colored troops, 18 regiments. They were paid $10 a month, and $3 were deducted for clothing, whereas white soldiers were paid $13 a month and had no deductions. June 1864, Congress granted retroactive equal pay. They also worked as nurses, cooks, and blacksmiths. The advantages of the Union: they had the superior leadership of Abraham Lincoln. They had a greater population. They had more military industrial power. They had more money, railroads, and farmland. Some of the disadvantages: weak motivation, no aggression, and fighting on unfamiliar territory. The Confederate advantage and disadvantage: some of the advantages: good military officers, fighting on home ground, strong motivation. Some of the disadvantages: weak leadership skills of Jefferson Davis. They had no navy, fewer men and supplies, few factories, a lot less money, and they had a weaker government overall. The deaths of this war were at least 750,000 people, or 2.4% of the population. 2.4% today is around 7.5 million people. The Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st to July 3rd, 1863, the bloodiest battle. 51,116 people died. The Battle of Antietam was the bloodiest day in war. 22,760 people died that day. The end.